My name is Raphael. I'm 28, and I work as a vet in a clinic in the city. But this story didn't happen between white walls and stainless steel tables. It happened in a place where the smell of wet earth mixes with sweat, where the silence of the dawn is broken only by the distant lowing of cattle. And it started with a question I never imagined I'd ask. Do you want me to help you take a shower? There are moments in life when you look back and realize exactly when everything changed. For me, it was when I agreed to help him. When I said yes to something that seemed simple, but carried a weight I couldn't yet understand. And his answer, low, husky, almost a whisper, still echoes in my head. Don't stop. But let me back up a bit. Let me tell you how it all started. I grew up in the city Austin, actually. My routine was always predictable. Wake up early, see patients at my practice, grab the same coffee from the same cafe, go home, repeat. But 3 months ago, my uncle called me. He owned a ranch about 4 hours outside the city, and he needed someone to look after the cattle for a few weeks. An outbreak of brucellosis in the region had everyone on high alert, and he needed someone with veterinary experience, someone he could trust. I agreed. Not just for the extra cash, but because, honestly, I needed a break. The city was suffocating me. The same streets, the same faces, the same feeling that I was living on autopilot. So I grabbed my suitcase, threw it in the back seat of the pickup, and drove out to the ranch. When I arrived, it was like entering another world. The wooden gate creaking, the dirt road kicking up dust at every turn, the sky so open it seemed infinite. And in the middle of it all, him. I saw him for the first time in the corral, fixing a fence. Dark leather hat, plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up, boots caked in mud. He had his back to me. But I could sense the strength in his shoulders, the assurance in his movements. When my uncle introduced me, he took off his hat, ran a hand through his sweaty hair, and looked me straight in the eye. "This is Diego," my uncle said. "The ranch foreman. He knows every inch of this place better than I do." Diego extended his hand. His palm was rough, full of calluses, but his grip was firm, confident. He was about 35, maybe a little older. Sun-weathered skin, light eyes that contrasted with the bronze tone of his face. And when he smiled, a little smirk, I felt something I didn't expect. A pang of curiosity, of interest. "Welcome," he said, his voice deep and deliberate. "Hope you can handle the grind." In the first few weeks, the routine was grueling. Waking up before sunrise, checking the cattle, applying vaccines, treating wounds. Diego was always around, teaching me the ropes of the field. How to spot a sick cow just by the way she separates from the herd. How to tie a knot that holds the weight of an angry bull. How to read the sky and know if it's going to rain before the clouds even appear. He wasn't much of a talker, but when he spoke, every word carried weight. He told stories of the ranch, of droughts that almost broke everyone, of nights he had to sleep in the barn to protect the herd from coyotes. And I listened, fascinated. It wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it. Calm, secure. As if every experience had shaped who he was. I started noticing details. The way he held the horse's reins, firm but gentle. The way he looked at the horizon when he thought no one was watching. As if looking for something he'd never find. And in the few times our eyes met, I felt an electric current I couldn't name. But then the accident happened. It was a Friday afternoon. We were fixing the barn roof. Diego went up the ladder, and I stayed down below, passing the tools. Suddenly, I heard a crack. The rotten wood of the beam gave way, and he fell. It wasn't a high fall, but it was ugly. He hit the ground shoulder first with a dull thud that made my heart stop. I ran to him. He was lying on his side, breathing shallowly, his face twisted in pain. "Diego!" I knelt beside him. "Are you okay? Can you move?" He tried to get up, but let out a low groan and fell back. "My shoulder," he said, his voice tense. "Think it dislocated." I helped him sit up, slowly, and examined his shoulder. It was swollen, out of place, not serious enough to need a hospital, but it was going to hurt like hell. And the worst part, he wouldn't be able to do anything alone for the next few days. "I'm taking you home," I said, "and I'm going to keep an eye on you. You won't be able to manage alone like this," He looked at me, his light eyes full of a mixture of pain and something else. Pride, maybe. Resistance. But then, he nodded. All right. I took him to his house, a simple wooden structure in the middle of the farm. I helped him lie down on the sofa, made a makeshift sling to immobilize his shoulder, and gave him a painkiller I had in my bag. Rest, I said. Tomorrow we'll see how you are. But the next day, he was worse. Not just the pain in his shoulder, but he had spent the whole night sweating. Low fever, probably because of the inflammation, and when he tried to get up to go to the bathroom, he almost fell. Diego, I said, holding him by his good arm. You're in no condition to do anything alone. Let me help you. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't just pain, it was vulnerability. A crack in the armor he always wore. I don't like depending on anyone, he said, his voice low. I know. I held his gaze. But everyone needs help sometimes. He took a deep breath, and then nodded. That's how it started. I began taking care of him, helping him get dressed, eat, move around the house, and every day, the distance between us seemed to shrink. We talked more. He told me about his ex-wife who had left years ago, tired of the isolated life on the ranch. About the son he barely saw, who lived in the capital. About the loneliness he carried, disguised as independence. And I started to realize that my presence there wasn't just practical. It was something more. In the long silences, in the looks that lasted a second longer than they should have, in the way he relaxed when I was around. Until that day came. It was late afternoon. Diego hadn't been able to shower properly for 3 days. He had tried by himself in the morning, but the pain in his shoulder was so intense he could barely get his shirt off. When I arrived to change his bandages for the night, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, his face looking tired. I need a shower, he said, almost as if he were confessing something, but I won't be able to do it alone. I looked at him. In that moment, the air between us changed. It wasn't just about caretaking anymore. There was something unspoken, something hanging there, heavy and inevitable. Do you want me to help you? I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I expected. He looked at me for a long moment, and then nodded. Yes. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower, adjusted the water temperature. My heart was racing. When I came back, he was already standing, waiting. I helped him take off his shirt slowly, being careful not to hurt his shoulder. His skin was hot, bronzed by the sun. I could feel his breathing change, becoming heavier. We stepped into the stall. The water fell over us, and for an instant, everything seemed to stop. I was there, with this man I barely knew, but who somehow already meant something I couldn't explain. I took the sponge, soaped it up, and started running it over his back. Slowly. Feeling every muscle, every scar, every story that body carried. And then he turned his head, looked at me over his good shoulder, and whispered those 2 words that would change everything. Don't stop. We walked in silence to the bathroom. He was limping slightly, shifting his weight to his good shoulder, and I followed beside him, trying not to look as nervous as I felt. The hallway was narrow, and with every step, I felt the heat coming off him, that smell of leather mixed with the sweat of hard work. It was strange how something as simple as walking beside someone could make my heart race like that. When we reached the bathroom, I pushed the door open and turned on the light. It was a small space, modest but clean, with white tiles and an older glass shower stall. The faucet dripped lightly, keeping a steady rhythm that seemed amplified in the silence. I looked at him and realized the situation was real. There was no turning back. I had offered to help, and now I needed to do it. Let me get the water running first, I said, more to break the silence than anything else. I turned on the shower and waited for the water to warm up. The steam began to rise slowly, filling the bathroom with that warm mist that made everything a bit hazy. I tested the temperature with my hand, adjusting it until it was just right, not too hot, not too cold. When I turned back to him, he was standing there, looking at the floor, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It's ready, I said softly. He nodded but didn't move. We stood there for a few seconds, neither of us knowing exactly how to start. Until he brought his good hand to the first buckle of his belt, and I felt my breath catch. "You're going to have to help me with my shirt," he said, his voice coming out huskier than before. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. His hands had already undone the first few buttons, but when he got near his injured shoulder, he froze. You could see the pain crossing his face, even though he tried to hide it. "Let me do it," I offered. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the buttons. It was a thick flannel shirt, worn and faded, and every button I undid revealed more of his sun-bronzed skin. I tried to focus only on the task, but it was impossible not to notice the details. His broad chest, the muscles defined by hard labor, the small scars that marked his skin here and there. Each one of them told a story I would never know. When I reached the last button, I stopped. The shirt was open, but he was still wearing it. "It's going to hurt when I take it off the shoulder," I warned. "I know," he replied. "Just go slow." I placed my hand on the collar of the shirt, on the side of his good shoulder, and started to pull carefully. He leaned forward a bit to make it easier, and I managed to slide the fabric down his arm. But when it reached the injured shoulder, he held his breath. I felt the tension in his body. Every muscle contracted to withstand the pain without showing it. "Sorry," I murmured, trying to be as gentle as possible. "It's okay," he said through gritted teeth. Finally, the shirt came off, and I let it fall to the floor. He stood there shirtless, and for a moment I simply looked. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was something else. It was his vulnerability right there in front of me, a man who spent his days being strong and self-sufficient, now needing help to do something as basic as taking a shower. "Can you manage the belt?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded and undid the buckle himself, letting the belt slide through the loops of his jeans. Then came the button and the zipper. I looked away instinctively, even though I knew I'd have to look at some point. I heard the sound of jeans sliding down, fabric brushing against skin, and when I looked back, he was just in his underwear, simple black boxers. "I'll need support getting in," he said, nodding toward the shower stall. I stepped closer and let him drape his good arm over my shoulder. His weight was solid, real, and when we took the first step together, I felt his body adjusting to mine. It was intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. We opened the shower door, and the steam engulfed us immediately. The water beat down hard, creating a constant drone that filled the space. He stepped in slowly, and I stood there at the entrance, sort of unsure what to do now. "You're going to have to come in too," he said, looking at me over his shoulder. "You won't be able to help me from out there." He was right. I took a deep breath, pulled off my t-shirt, and tossed it on the floor next to his shirt. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I undid my jeans button and hesitated for a second before taking them off too. I stood there in my boxers, just like him, and stepped into the shower. The hot water hit us at the same time, and the steam became even denser. I blinked a few times, trying to get used to the heat and the proximity. His back was to me now, water running down his broad shoulders, cascading down his defined back. I grabbed the soap and lathered up my hands, trying not to think too much about what I was about to do. "I'll start with your back," I said. He didn't answer, just nodded slightly. I placed my hands on his skin, and the contact caught me off guard. It was hot, wet, and beneath my hands I felt his muscles moving as he breathed. I started spreading the lather slowly, going over his back, his shoulders, avoiding the injured side. He let his head drop forward, relaxing under my touch, and I heard a low sigh escape him. It wasn't a sigh of pain. It was something else. Relief, maybe. Or something I didn't want to name just yet. I kept washing, moving down his back to his waist. My fingers grazed the waistband of his boxers, and I stopped there. This was helping someone take a shower. That's all. But my body wasn't getting the message. I felt every touch, every movement, as if it were amplified 1,000 times. "Turn to the side," I asked, my voice coming out huskier than I expected. He turned slowly, careful with his shoulder, and now he was facing me. Our eyes met for a second. and I saw something there that made me swallow hard. It wasn't just gratitude. There was another layer, something deeper he wasn't saying. I lathered up again and started washing his chest. The water fell between us, creating a translucent veil that distorted everything. I felt his chest rise and fall beneath my hands, his heartbeat steady, constant. When I got close to the injured shoulder, he closed his eyes. "Does it hurt?" I asked softly. "No," he replied without opening his eyes. "That's not it." I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't ask either. I kept washing, moving down his arms, one at a time. When I reached the injured arm, I was even more careful, barely touching, just lightly applying the foam. He kept his eyes closed the whole time, his jaw slightly tense. I rinsed off the soap and grabbed the shampoo. He opened his eyes when I approached with the bottle in hand. "Hair, too?" he asked, with a half smile that caught me by surprise. "That's what I'm here for," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He lowered his head to make it easier, and I poured shampoo into my hands before running them through his hair. It was short but thick, and when I started massaging his scalp, he let out another one of those sighs. This time, there was a hint of surrender in it, as if he were letting his guard down. I massaged for a few seconds, then guided his head under the showerhead to rinse. The water washed away the foam, running down his face, his neck, his chest. He kept his eyes closed, and I took the chance to really look at him. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was the way he surrendered there, trusting me in a way that seemed to go beyond the moment. When he opened his eyes again, he caught me staring. We stood there for a moment, water falling between us, the steam creating a bubble that seemed to separate us from the rest of the world. I saw his jaw clench, as if he were fighting not to say something. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You're welcome," I replied. But I knew this was more than just thanking me for a shower. He turned to leave, and I held his arm lightly to help. We stepped out of the shower together, dripping water onto the bathroom floor. I grabbed a towel and started drying him first, going over his chest, his back, his arms. When I got close to the injured shoulder, he placed his hand over mine, stopping the movement. "I can finish," he said, but he didn't let go of my hand right away. We stood there for a few seconds, his hand over mine, eyes locked on each other. There was something unspoken hanging in the air, something heavy and hot that neither of us had the courage to name yet, until he slowly let go of my hand and took the towel. "You're soaked too," he observed, looking at me. It was true. My boxers were wet, clinging to my body, and I could still feel the water running down my chest. I grabbed another towel and dried myself quickly, trying not to think about how that whole situation was strange and intimate at the same time. When we finished, we got dressed in silence. He put on a clean t-shirt I had grabbed earlier, and I helped guide it over his head, careful of the injured shoulder. The jeans were easier, and within minutes he was dressed again. We left the bathroom and walked back to his room. The house was quiet, just the sound of our footsteps echoing in the hallway. When we reached the bedroom door, he stopped and turned to me. "You helped me more than you realize today," he said, and there was something in his eyes that told me it wasn't just about the shower. "Anyone would have done the same," I replied, though I knew that wasn't true. He smiled faintly, a tired but genuine smile. "No, they wouldn't," he said softly. "And you know that." Before I could answer, he went into the room and closed the door slowly. I stood there for a moment, still feeling the warmth of the water, the touch of his skin, the weight of that gaze. That was when I realized this wasn't just about helping someone shower. Something was happening between us, something neither of us was ready to admit yet, but it was there, growing in the silence, in the steam, in the careful touches. And the truth is, I didn't know if I was ready to handle what came next. The water kept falling between us, but something had shifted. It wasn't just the soap sliding over my injured body. It was the way he looked at me, how he breathed, how every touch seemed to carry a weight that went beyond practical care. I was vulnerable in a way I'd never been in my life, naked, hurt, dependent, And he was there. This man who seemed to have stepped out of another era, caring for me with a gentleness that contrasted completely with all that brute strength. We finished the bath in silence. He helped me dry off, dressed me in one of his shirts that looked huge on me, and took me to the living room. He settled me onto the sofa with almost reverent care. "Coffee?" he asked, already turning toward the kitchen. "Please." While he prepared it, I looked around. The house was simple, masculine, without a touch of decoration beyond the necessary. But there was order, a care in things. The books stacked on the side table, the boots lined up at the entrance, the worn but clean sofa where I sat. He returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and sat in the armchair across from me. For the first time since I woke up, there was physical distance between us. And strangely, that made everything feel more intimate. "You live here alone?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "For about 12 years, he said, blowing on his coffee, "since I bought the property." 12 years alone. He gave a half smile. "You make it sound like a long time." It is a long time. I have the hands working here. There are people in the fields during the day. But at night? His silence was answer enough. I took a sip of the coffee. It was strong, just the way I liked it. How did he know? Or was it just a coincidence? "And you?" he asked. "What was a city boy doing on that road in the middle of the night?" I could have lied, invented some story about work, family, about anything. But something in that moment, in all that vulnerability, made the truth come out easier. "Running away," I said. He didn't seem surprised. He just waited. I have a life back in Dallas. Apartment, job, that whole routine. And everything looked perfect on paper, you know? But I woke up every day feeling like I was living someone else's life. And what changed? Nothing changed. That's the problem. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I just realized that if I didn't do something, I was going to spend my whole life in that prison. He took another sip of coffee, watching me with those eyes that seemed to see more than I was saying. "And does this escape have a destination? Or is it just a way?" "I don't know." I just threw my things in the car and started driving. I thought I'd find some answer on the road. Did you? I looked at him. At that man who had saved me, cared for me, touched me with an intimacy that went beyond necessity. At that isolated house in the middle of nowhere where I sat, injured but strangely whole. "I think I found better questions," I said. Something crossed his face. Recognition. As if he knew exactly what I was talking about. "I was married," he said suddenly. It wasn't what I expected to hear. 18 years. Good woman. 2 kids. We had a good life in the city. I worked at a company, made good money. Everything correct. He paused, looking at the mug in his hands. But I woke up every day pretending to be someone I wasn't. And the more time passed, the more I felt like I was dying inside. My heart raced. I knew what was coming next. I recognized that pain in his voice. I tried. God knows I tried to be the man everyone expected. But there are things you can't fake forever. What happened? I reached a point where I had 2 choices. Either I kept living that lie until it completely destroyed me, or I had the courage to be honest. "Did you tell her?" He nodded. "Worst conversation of my life. She didn't deserve that. The boys didn't deserve it. But continuing to lie would have hurt everyone even more." "How did they react?" "She cried, got angry, went through every phase you can imagine. The boys were still young. They didn't really understand at the time. Today they're adults. One talks to me every now and then. The other chose his mother's side." The pain in his voice was palpable. Old, but still alive. "I don't blame any of them," he continued. "I destroyed a family. There's no way to do that without causing pain, but you couldn't keep living a lie." "No, I couldn't." He looked me straight in the eyes. "And even with everything that happened, with everything I lost, I don't regret being honest, because the alternative was worse." "What was the alternative?" "Dying inside. spending the rest of my life as a ghost of the person I was supposed to be. I fell silent, processing. That strong, solitary man, living on that isolated property for 12 years. It wasn't just a lifestyle choice, it was an exile he had chosen. Is that why you came here? To the middle of nowhere? I couldn't live in the city anymore. Everyone knew, everyone had an opinion. And I needed a place where I could be who I was without having to answer to anyone. And you found that here? He looked around, at the simple house, at the windows facing the infinite fields outside. Here, I found peace. Loneliness too. But at least it's an honest loneliness. Something about the way he said that broke me a little. Because I understood. I understood too well. Do you have anyone? I asked, and as soon as the words came out, I regretted it. It was too invasive. But he didn't seem offended. He just gave that sad half-smile again. Every now and then someone shows up. A ranch hand who stays a few months, a traveler passing through. But nothing that lasts. I think I've made peace with that. Doesn't it get lonely? Every day. His honesty was brutal. But it's better to be alone and real than to be with someone and living a lie. I already tried the second option. It almost killed me. I swallowed hard. It was like he was describing exactly what I was running from. That feeling of suffocation, of living a life that wasn't mine. That's why you were running, isn't it? He asked, his voice soft. You're running from that choice. I don't know if I have the courage you did. Nobody knows until they're in the moment. He leaned forward a bit, but let me tell you something. That anguish you're feeling, that sense of being trapped in the wrong life, it doesn't go away on its own. It only gets worse. What if I make the wrong choice? The only wrong choice is to keep pretending. The rest you figure out along the way. I stared at him, this man who had lost everything to gain himself, and for the first time in a long time I felt like someone truly understood. Thank you, I said, for saving me, for taking care of me, for this. For what? For being honest, for showing me it's possible to survive on the other side of that choice. He watched me for a long moment, and then something happened that changed everything. He stood up, crossed the distance between us, and sat on the couch next to me. He didn't touch me. He just stayed there, close enough for me to feel his warmth. You're going to be okay, he said, his voice low. Whatever choice you make, you'll be okay. I turned to look at him, and our faces were just inches apart. I could see details I'd missed before. The small wrinkles around his eyes, the stubble, a small scar on his eyebrow, and I could see something else. Something he was trying to hide, but that shone through anyway. He wanted me. It wasn't just care. It wasn't just kindness. It was desire. It was need. It was that honest loneliness he'd mentioned, showing itself in all its intensity. And the scariest part? I wanted it too. You know something is happening here, right? I said, my voice coming out huskier than I intended. He didn't look away. I know. And what do we do about it? For a long moment, he didn't answer. He just sat there, looking at me with that intensity that made my stomach flip. I don't know, he finally said. But I don't think we need to decide right now. He was right. I was hurt, vulnerable, confused. And he was. Well, he was being too gentle to take advantage of that. But when he got up to get more coffee, when I saw his broad back moving away, when I felt the absence of his warmth beside me, I knew one thing for sure. Something had changed between us. Something with no turning back. The water had stopped running a long time ago, but time between us seemed to have frozen somewhere between the shower and that conversation, and I had no idea what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out. That suspended moment stretched on, neither of us wanting to break the connection. Steam from the shower kept rising between us, creating a sort of translucent curtain that made everything feel more unreal, more intimate. I was still holding the towel in my hands, but I didn't move. Neither did he. We just stood there, looking at each other, with a sensory awareness so sharp I could hear my own breathing mixed with his. The outside world had completely disappeared. There was no more ranch, no more work, no more life I had left behind in the city. There was only that small bathroom, the hot steam, and the proximity of a man who had become the gravitational center of my existence in a matter of days. I finally moved, breaking the spell for an instant. I ran the towel over his shoulders with slow, almost reverent movements. His skin was hot from the water, his muscles tense beneath my hands. It wasn't just practical help anymore. We knew that. Every touch had turned into something different, charged with an intention that neither of us was ready to name out loud. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice so low I could barely hear it. But it wasn't gratitude for the practical care. It was gratitude for something bigger, something deeper. For me being there, for not running away, for staying, even when it would have been easier to keep my distance. As I dried his back, I felt my heart pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. My hands trembled slightly, and it wasn't from nerves, it was from restraint. Every fiber of my being wanted to cross that invisible line that still stood between us, but something held me back. Fear, perhaps, or respect, or simply the realization that once we crossed it, there would be no going back. He turned slowly, meeting my gaze again. The towel slipped from my hands, forgotten on the floor. We stood there, face to face, so close that the heat of his skin warmed mine. It wasn't just our bodies that were close. It was something deeper, more terrifying. It was as if our souls had leaned toward one another, on the verge of touching. He began, then stopped. He swallowed hard, tried again. "I'm not good with words." "You don't have to be," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. But the truth was, I felt anything but steady. Inside, I was a whirlwind. My mind raced in 1,000 different directions, processing every detail of that moment. The way he looked at me. It wasn't just desire, though desire was there too. It was something more complex. Recognition, perhaps. As if he were seeing in me a reflection of something he felt himself, but had never been able to express. He raised his hand slowly, almost hesitantly, and touched my face. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a casual brush like the ones before. It was deliberate, intentional. His calloused fingers traced the line of my jaw with a delicacy that completely contrasted with the hardness he projected to the world. I closed my eyes for a second, absorbing his touch. It was the first contact between us that was clearly, unequivocally about something more than just practical help. It was recognition. It was desire. It was permission. When I opened my eyes again, I saw his were shining in a different way. It wasn't just the reflection of the dim bathroom light, it was emotion. Raw, unfiltered, impossible to hide. "I spent so much time," he said, his voice hoarse, "pretending I didn't feel anything. That I didn't need anyone." He paused, his fingers still resting on my face. I built a whole life around that idea. That I was complete on my own. That solitude was strength. I said nothing, just gently held his wrist, keeping his hand against my cheek. It was my way of saying, "Go on, I'm here, I'm listening." "But then you showed up," he continued, and now there was a crack in his voice that broke me inside. "With your inexperience, your honesty, your way of looking at everything like it was the first time." And suddenly, he shook his head as if he couldn't believe what he was about to admit. "Suddenly, solitude doesn't feel like strength anymore. It just feels empty." My chest tightened. I wanted to say so many things that I understood, that I felt the same, that he wasn't alone in this. But the words caught in my throat, blocked by the sheer intensity of the moment. He leaned his face closer to mine, moving so slowly it felt like he was wading through water. The steam from the shower continued to rise around us, creating a bubble of intimacy that seemed to sever us from the rest of reality. I could feel his breath on my face, warm and ragged. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered, his lips almost grazing mine. "I don't know how. how to be what I'm feeling. Nobody does, I replied, my own voice barely more than a whisper. We figure it out together. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. Every muscle in my body was tense with anticipation, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. But he didn't. Instead, he rested his forehead against mine, closing his eyes, as if gathering courage, or perhaps just allowing himself to feel that closeness, without taking the next step just yet. "Do you have any idea," he murmured against my skin, "how hard it is to keep this distance? How much I want to, but I can't. I shouldn't." "Why not?" The words slipped out before I could think. "Why can't you?" He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, and what I saw there took my breath away. It was pure conflict desire warring with fear, hope battling years of repression. His mask of hardness had cracked completely, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. "Because once I start," he said slowly, every word heavy with meaning, "I won't be able to stop, and you deserve someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who isn't an emotional wreck." "I don't want someone who knows what they're doing," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I want you, with all your cracks, your fears, your clumsiness with words. I want exactly that." He closed his eyes, as if my words had caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, they were wet. Not tears, not yet, but close. "How do you do that?" he asked, his voice breaking. "How are you so honest? So open about what you feel?" "Because I haven't learned how to build walls yet," I replied. "And honestly, I don't want to learn." Something changed in his face in that moment. The resistance I had felt from the start, that invisible barrier he kept between us, began to dissolve. It didn't disappear completely, but it grew thinner, more fragile. He held my face with both hands now, looking at me with an intensity that was almost scary. His thumbs traced small circles on my cheeks, a gesture so tender it contrasted completely with the roughness of his hands. "I need to tell you something," he finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Something I've never told anyone." My heart raced. The moment had arrived. After all the looks, all the near touches, all the built-up tension finally, he was going to say it. He was going to put into words what we had been dancing around since day one. "Go ahead," I said softly. "I'm here." He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I could see the internal struggle happening behind his eyes, years of repression fighting against the urgent desire to finally be honest, to finally be seen. "When I was younger," he began, then stopped, tried again. "I always knew there was something different about me, something I couldn't admit, not even to myself. So I built this persona, the tough cowboy, the solitary man who doesn't need anyone. It worked for years, kept everyone at a safe distance." He paused, his eyes searching mine as if looking for confirmation that it was safe to continue. I just held his wrists gently, encouraging him to go on. "But you," he continued, and now there was a mixture of pain and wonder in his voice. "You just bypassed all my defenses. Not because you tried to force it, but because you were genuine. You looked at me like I was human. Not a symbol, not a fantasy, but a real person with real feelings. Because that's what you are," I said quietly. He smiled, a small, sad, but genuine smile. "It's been so long since I felt like this. I'd forgotten what it was like." He leaned in closer, the steam rising between us, and whispered, "I need you to know that this, you and me, here, right now, isn't something casual for me. It's not just physical attraction or loneliness. It's—" He stopped again, searching for the right words. I could see the frustration on his face, the difficulty of expressing feelings he had spent decades repressing. "It's real," I finished for him. "And it's scary. And it's intense. And it's okay to be all of that at the same time." "Yes," he exhaled, as if I had lifted a weight off his shoulders. "Exactly that." We stayed like that for a few more seconds or maybe minutes. I had completely lost track of time, connected by touch, by the gaze, by shared vulnerability. The air between us was charged with possibility, with unspoken promise. Then he leaned in even closer, his face so close our noses almost touched. The steam kept rising around us, enveloping us in a warm mist that made everything seem like a dream. His breathing was ragged, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my whole body tremble. "There's something," he murmured, his voice so low I could barely hear it over the sound of my own heart beating, "that I've never said out loud, never allowed myself to even think straight about. But you make me want to." He stopped, swallowing hard. His fingers tightened slightly on my face, as if anchoring himself to me to find the courage to continue. And then he whispered those two words that changed absolutely everything. "Don't stop." His voice was so low I almost didn't hear it. Almost. But those words, those two simple words pierced through every defense I had built, every wall I had raised over 24 years of living in fear of being who I really was. "Don't stop," he repeated, a little firmer now, his eyes still closed, as if admitting that out loud was the hardest and most necessary thing he had ever done. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe right. My hand was still against his chest, feeling his heart beating too hard, too fast. And suddenly I understood. It wasn't about the massage, it wasn't about the physical touch. It was about everything we were doing there, in that cabin lost in the middle of nowhere, far from everything and everyone. Don't stop seeing me. Don't stop accepting me. Don't stop making me feel safe to be myself. "Roberto." My voice came out weak, almost broken. He opened his eyes then, and what I saw there, man, I had never seen anyone look at me like that. There was fear, yes, but there was also hope, desire, raw, absolute truth. He was completely exposed in front of me with no defenses, no mask. "I don't want this to end," he said, each word coming out slowly, as if confessing a secret kept for decades. "I don't want you to leave in 2 weeks and for us to pretend this never happened. I don't want to go back to that life where I pretend to be someone I'm not. You know that moment when the whole world stops? When the hum of the air conditioner, the distant sound of cars on the road, even your own breathing, all of it just disappears?" That was what was happening. There was only him, me, and that confession hanging in the air between us. "I spent my whole life hiding this," he continued, his voice getting firmer, more urgent. "I got married, had kids, built a reputation as a real man, a respected foreman. But inside I always knew I was living a lie. And then you showed up." He ran his hand over his face and I saw that he was trembling. "You showed up with that look of yours, lost, trying to pretend you knew what you were doing on the ranch. And I saw in you everything I've spent my life trying to hide. I saw the doubt, the fear, the longing to be authentic, but without the courage to own it. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could be authentic together." My heart was hammering in my chest. There were tears in my eyes, and I hadn't even noticed when they started to fall. "Me too," I said, my voice coming out as low as his whisper had been. "I'm scared too. I've spent my whole life pretending, hiding, trying to be what others expected of me." I took a step closer. Now there was barely half a meter between us. "But when I look at you," I had to stop, take a deep breath, find the courage to speak the truth I had barely admitted to myself. "When I look at you, I feel whole for the first time in my life. I don't need to pretend. I don't need to hide. I can just be." I saw his eyes tear up. A 50-year-old man, strong, masculine, respected, completely vulnerable in front of me. "Don't stop," he repeated for the third time. But now it wasn't a whisper. It was a plea, a supplication, a promise. "Don't stop seeing me. Don't stop accepting me. Don't stop. Don't stop giving us a chance." And something inside me just broke. All those barriers, all those fears, all those layers of protection I had built up over the years, everything crumbled at once. I closed the distance between us. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. It was the most natural thing in the world. My hand slid from the side of his neck to the nape, fingers tangling in his short hair. I felt the exact moment he realized what was about to happen. I felt his tense body relax. I felt his breath hitch for a second, and then I kissed him. It wasn't our first kiss, but it was different from anything that had happened before. Because now there was truth. Now there was confession. Now there were two people who had finally admitted, to each other and to themselves, that this was real, that this mattered, that this was much bigger than physical attraction or repressed curiosity. His arms wrapped around me with a force bordering on desperation, pulling me against his body. I felt the heat of his skin through his thin t-shirt, felt his chest rising and falling with ragged breathing, felt his hand trembling slightly as it gripped my waist, and I returned it all with the same intensity, the same urgency, the same absolute need to be close, to be accepted, to finally be truly seen. When we pulled apart, we were both breathless, foreheads resting against each other, eyes closed, breaths mingling in the tiny space between us. "I don't want to hide anymore," I whispered. "I don't want to pretend anymore. Not with you." "Me neither," he replied, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "Me neither, Lucas. Never again." For a long moment we just stayed there, embraced in the middle of that simple cabin, far from everything and everyone. Two men who had spent their entire lives hiding, finally finding the courage to be seen. There was no rush. There was no urgency. There was only that deep stillness, that peace that comes when you finally stop fighting against who you really are. His hand moved up to my face, thumb tracing a soft line down my cheek, wiping away a tear I hadn't even realized had fallen. "Do you have any idea how long it's been since I've felt like this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have any idea how long it's been since I let myself feel anything for real?" I shook my head, unable to speak. Because I knew exactly how long. Because it was the same amount of time I had spent hiding, repressing myself, pretending to be someone I wasn't. "All my life," he continued, eyes fixed on mine. "All my life I did what was expected of me. Married who was expected. Had the family that was expected. Lived the life that was expected. And with every day that passed, I felt a part of me dying inside." His voice cracked, and he had to stop, take a deep breath, find the strength to go on. "But here with you, I feel alive again. I feel real. And I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." My heart was racing. My head was spinning with the magnitude of what was happening. Because it wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just desire. It was recognition. It was two souls who had lived their whole lives hiding, finally meeting and saying, "I see you. I accept you. I understand you. You won't lose me," I promised, my hand still on the back of his neck, holding on tight as if it were the only thing keeping me standing. "I don't know how we're going to make this work. I don't know what will happen when I go back to São Paulo. But I know I don't want to pretend this never happened. I can't, not after this." He smiled then. It was a small smile, almost shy but completely genuine. And in that smile, I saw hope. I saw a future. I saw possibility. "We'll figure it out," he said, with a certainty that surprised me. "I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out." And then he kissed me again, but this time it was different. There was no more urgency, no more desperation. There was tenderness, there was care, there was a promise. When we broke apart, he guided us to the bed, and we both just lay there, facing each other, hands intertwined in the space between our bodies. "Stay with me tonight," he asked, his fingers tightening around mine. "It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Just stay." "I'll stay," I answered without hesitation. "For as long as you want." "Would forever be too long?" he asked, and there was pure vulnerability in that question. Fear of asking for too much, of exposing himself too much. I squeezed his hand tighter. "No," I said. "It wouldn't." And there, in that silence full of meaning, in that moment suspended between everything that had been and everything that could still be, I understood what that strange sensation in my chest was. It was liberation. It was acceptance. It was, for the first time in my life, the permission to be completely, entirely, absolutely myself. Roberto closed his eyes, his face relaxing into a peace I had never seen in him before. And I stayed there, watching, memorizing every detail. The crinkles around his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell as his breathing calmed. "Lucas," he murmured, already half lost between sleep and wakefulness. "Yes, thank you." "For what?" "For letting me be myself, for not being afraid of me, for not stopping." I felt my chest tighten with the sheer emotion of those words. "No, thank you," I whispered back. "For teaching me it's possible. For showing me I don't need to spend my whole life hiding. For giving me courage." He opened his eyes once more, and what I saw there was so intense, so profound it almost hurt. "We saved each other," he said simply. And it was true. Because in that hotel room that night, two people who had spent their entire lives living lies finally found the courage to live the truth. And that truth had a name. It had a face. It had a heart beating in sync with mine. In that moment, everything changed. Not just between us, but inside us. Because when you finally stop fighting against who you really are, when you finally find someone who accepts you completely, you can't go back anymore. You can't pretend anymore. You can't hide anymore. You can only be. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. The first few seconds after his confession were the quietest of my life. Not that tense silence from before, full of fear and doubt. It was a different silence. Complete. As if the whole world had stopped to give us a moment just for ourselves. I was still leaning against the bathroom wall, my heart pounding, trying to process what I had just heard. "I have feelings for you too, Lucas. I always have." His words echoed in my head, mixed with the sound of my own breathing. I opened my eyes slowly and found him there. So close, looking at me with that intensity that always unraveled me inside. But now there was something else. There was tenderness. There was a promise. Are you sure?" I managed to ask, my voice still trembling. He smiled, that half smile I had learned to read over the last few weeks. But this time there was no hesitation. There was certainty. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life, Lucas." And then he kissed me again. Slowly, without rushing, as if we had all the time in the world. And maybe we did. For the first time, there was no urgency, no fear of getting caught, no shame. It was just the two of us, accepting what had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. When we pulled apart, he ran his hand over my face, his thumb tracing my cheek with a gentleness that contrasted completely with the image everyone had of the tough, serious foreman. "We need to get dressed," he said, with a somewhat amused tone. "Before someone comes looking for us and finds two idiots locked in the bathroom." I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I laughed for real, without weight, without fear, and he laughed too. And it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. We got dressed in silence, but it was different from all the previous silences. Our eyes met in the mirror, small smiles were exchanged. When he bumped into me while grabbing his shirt, he didn't pull away quickly like before. He lingered, our shoulders touching, and it was comforting in a way I didn't even know I needed. Before opening the door, he held my hand. Just for a second, but it was enough. "Let's take this slow," he said softly. "No rush, no pressure. We'll figure it out together, yeah?" I nodded, squeezing his hand back before letting go. When we returned to the hall, the party was still going on, but it was starting to thin out. A few curious glances came our way, but nothing too obvious. They probably thought we were just smoking outside or something. Tomas was near the bar, talking to some ranch hands. When he saw us, he gave that mischievous smile of his and made a subtle gesture asking, "Is everything okay?" I nodded slightly, and he seemed satisfied, turning back to his conversation. Roberto and I stood there, close but not clinging, keeping up appearances but knowing that something fundamental had changed between us. It was strange. It was scary. It was perfect. Later, when we headed back to the bunkhouse, we walked in silence under the starry sky. The smell of wet earth mixed with the distant sound of the music still coming from the barn. It was the same path I'd walked dozens of times since I arrived, but it felt completely different now. "How do you think it's going to be?" I asked when we got close to the door. He stopped, looking at the dark horizon, the distant lights of the farm flickering like fireflies. "Honestly, I don't know." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as a sign he was processing something important. "Here at the ranch, with the hands, with the owner, it's going to have to be discreet, at least for now. It's not that I'm ashamed, Lucas. It's just that..." "I understand," I cut in, because I really did. "It's not about shame. It's about survival. About keeping our jobs. Our safety." He looked at me with gratitude. "Exactly. But that doesn't mean we have to hide what we feel. It just means we need to be smart about how we live it." "And what does that mean for us?" I insisted, needing to hear it out loud. He turned fully toward me, and even in the dim light, I could see the determination in his eyes. "It means that when we're alone, when it's safe, I want to be with you for real. Not just physically. I want to know who you are, what you think, what makes you happy." He took a step closer. "It means that for the first time in my life, I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not. At least not when I'm with you." I felt my chest tighten, but it was good. It was that good kind of ache when something important is happening. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Scared of ruining this. Scared of not being enough. Scared that one day you'll wake up and realize the risk isn't worth it." Roberto took another step closer, and this time there was no one around to see us, so he touched my face again. That gesture that was quickly becoming my favorite. "Lucas, I spent 10 years pretending. 10 years hiding, hating myself a little more each day for not having the courage to be who I really am." His voice was thick with emotion. "You showed up here, all lost and scared, and somehow you reminded me of when I was younger, before I built all these walls. Seeing you struggling with the same things I struggled with made me want to be brave again." "You made me want to be brave too," I confessed. "You have no idea." He smiled, and it was that full smile, without barriers, that I had seen so rarely. "Then we'll be brave together. It's going to be hard sometimes. There will be days we'll want to give up. But it's worth it," I finished. "It's worth it," he confirmed. We stood there for a few more minutes, just looking at each other, memorizing that moment. Because it was one of those moments you know you'll carry forever, that defines a before and after in your life. When we finally went into the bunkhouse, everything was quiet. The other hands were already asleep or still at the party. Roberto walked me to my bed, and before going to his corner, he whispered, "Tomorrow life goes back to normal. Work, routine, everyone watching us. But at night, when everyone's asleep, we talk. Deal?" "Deal." I lay on my bed, still fully dressed, staring at the wooden ceiling I'd looked at so many nights over the last few weeks. But everything seemed different now. The weight I'd been carrying in my chest since I arrived, that constant feeling of being out of place, of pretending, had lifted considerably. It hadn't disappeared completely. There was still fear. There were still doubts. There was still a whole world out there that wouldn't understand, that would judge, that would make us suffer if they found out. But for the first time, I wasn't alone in that fear. I heard Roberto moving on the other side of the bunkhouse, probably getting ready to sleep too. And just knowing he was there, that we shared this secret now in a completely new way, made me feel more whole than I had felt in a long time. In the following days, we developed a routine. During the day, we were foreman and hand. He gave orders. I obeyed. We kept a professional distance, maybe even more than before, to overcompensate. But there were little moments. A lingering look when no one was watching. A disguised touch of the hand when passing a tool. Little confirmations that it wasn't imagination, that it was real. At night, after everyone was asleep, We talked in whispers, sometimes for hours. He told me about growing up on the neighboring property, about his first crush on a ranch hand at 17 that he never had the courage to tell, about the loneliness of hiding who you are in a place where everyone thinks they know you. I talked about the city, about how even there, with all the apparent freedom, I had never allowed myself to be completely honest, about how my friends had no idea who I really was, about how I had run away to the ranch not just to escape problems, but to escape myself. "Funny," he said one night, lying on his bed while I sat on the floor leaning against the wall, keeping my distance in case anyone woke up. "You came here thinking you'd hide better, and ended up finding yourself. And you stayed here thinking you could bury who you are in hard work," I replied. "But we can't run from ourselves forever." "No," he agreed. "You can't." There was a moment, a week after the party, that I'll cherish forever. We were fixing a fence in an isolated part of the ranch, just the two of us. The sun was setting, painting the sky with those shades of orange and pink that only exist out in the country. I was hammering a plank when I felt him stop beside me, just looking at the horizon. I turned to ask if everything was okay, and I found an expression on his face I had never seen before. Peace. Pure and simple peace. "What is it?" I asked softly. He looked at me and smiled in that way that made my heart skip a beat. "I was just thinking that for the first time in 10 years, I look at this sunset and I don't feel alone." There was nothing to say to that, so I just smiled back, and we got back to work. But something had changed. It wasn't just about attraction or desire. It was about recognition, about being seen, about being accepted exactly as you are by someone who understands, because they're fighting the same battle. You know, here's something nobody really tells you about self-acceptance. It's not just one moment of clarity where suddenly everything's fine. It's a process. It's a choice you make every single day, sometimes several times a day. Choosing honesty, choosing courage, choosing to believe that you deserve love and acceptance, even when the whole world seems to be telling you otherwise. And having someone by your side, someone making the same choices, who understands the same battles. That changes everything. I can't promise the story ends with a perfect happily ever after. Life doesn't work that way, especially when you're living a truth that many people would prefer you kept hidden. But I can say I found something on that ranch, in that cramped bathroom during some random party. I found courage. I found authenticity. I found someone who made me want to be brave. And maybe that's what we're all looking for, deep down. Not necessarily the happy ending, but the courage to live our truth. The courage to be who we really are, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. Because that's when courage matters most. If you've made it this far, if this story hit home for you in any way, I want to hear from you. You're not alone on this journey, and neither am I. Sometimes we just need to remember that there are others out there, fighting the same battles, feeling the same fears, looking for the same courage. So subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share this with someone you think needs to hear it. Because stories like these, stories of real people finding courage in unexpected places, they matter. They remind us that we aren't alone. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one I tell. Until next time.